Hey everyone, how's it going? Today we are going to do our pack review. The spoilers have finally come out after a long, more than 1 month of waiting. We have the third pack of Flashpoint Cycle, Escalation. Joining me to review is top 16 UK Nets competitor and UK Net Runners, one of the authors on UK Net Runners, netrunners.co.uk. It's Mark Mottram. Hi Mark, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, doing fine. Completely botched the intro, but we'll ignore that and completely
Mm,
move on. So,
That's
because
okay.
we are doing this 1 month before Worlds, almost exactly 1 month, we will be giving ratings on whether we think the cards will be seen in any top 16 Worlds decks. And we'll start off with the first card of the pack. This is Obolus. I think it is Worlds worthy, and Mark thinks be it might see play in the top 16 of Worlds. So this is a new ANR console, gives one memory, and it increases your hand size with more tags and draws you cards when you access multiple cards once per turn. Seems really strong. What do you feel about it?
So I was just saying to you when this first got spoiled, kind of only noticed the first part, and I was like, "Huh, that seems quite cool." I mean, four cost for a console is quite expensive, but I was like, it's got potential protection for Boom, which we'll talk about shortly, which was the main card that I was kind of going, "Oh my god!" before Worlds. But yeah, then I kind of noticed the second half, and yeah, it's pretty insane if you can kind of combo it with the right kind of deck. I've been looking at it with Dave, my deck testing partner, and we were thinking about using it for that type of protection. But I mean, if you combo this with Faust and Medium, especially, like that's pretty insane. And there is a kind of anti-synergy in terms of turning wheel, but potentially if you could get something out of that, if you ignore the first part, it was pretty good for Faust fuel and drawing stuff. And maybe in a resource hate meta could replace Wildside, maybe.
Yep. So yeah, you pointed the main benefit right there. Temujin, which we saw last cycle, it kind of fuels your run. You point out R&D, you have a medium out. It fuels your runs, it pays for your breakers. Same thing with Obolus if you're using it with Faust. And it makes sense to have a Faust medium deck with Obolus.
Yeah,
I've seen the big boy run it. It's a Siphon Faust deck with mediums, which actually makes a lot of sense considering the first part, which I think
yeah,
a lot of people ignore. The more tags you have, the more hand size you have. As you said, it protects against boom and gives you the cards you need to keep running through R&D, which is amazing.
yeah.
As you said, it uh, can replace Wildside. I don't think it's a full-on replacement though, because it does need a lot to get going. 4 to install is expensive for a console, and
Yeah,
yeah, it doesn't get going until you actually find your medium. So that's a lot of setup. The
yeah.
benefit
So that's what I
is,
was going to say. It's kind
yep,
of like dependent if you're going to. Firstly, you need to find it. Are you going to run three of this? Secondly, you need to get your mediums set up, and you're going to be limited in terms of draw. Because if once you get your mediums going, then that's fine. But it's only a purge away, and then you're back down to kind of one card draw, and it's the first time the run ends. So it's not as if you can build it up and at the end draw three or four cards. It's literally the first run where you draw one card, and then that bit's blank for the rest of the turn. One of the other things I wanted to mention, which is why I've kind of put it as a maybe, is it is competing with a couple of the other Anarch consoles, which themselves are really strong in certain types of decks. Vigil, I have a nice affinity with, and does help in a world where the meta for drawing is kind of not as dependent on Wildside anymore. You've also got Turntable, which is going to be quite important if you're competing against EOI or anything that's using breaking news to 24/7 into things, and obviously the good old standard Grimoire as well. So it's got a lot of competitors out there, but I think that it is a really solid console in its own right if you're going to build around it.
yes, that is a very important point to bring up. Analog consoles are very good right now. There's a lot of reason to run Turntable, Grimoire for the 2 memory. Vigil is probably better if you're using an Ether deck because you don't access with Ether. So definitely, Obolus is not going to see prevalent play, but it has very niche users and it might come into use in the top 60. That's very good
Def-
analysis. Let's move on
Thanks.
to. We'll see if we can keep it up because this card is not that warmly welcome. Black Orchestra. It's the code gate equivalent of Paperclip. The good news is that it's in the same faction as Paperclip, so they are not spreading it across all 3 factions like they did with the dogs. The bad news is, because it's an ANR decoder, it has to suck. And boy, does it suck. Oh man, 3 credits to use that ability. You're paying 3 credits to break every single code gate at minimum. Goodness. What
Yeah.
deck wants this?
I think originally when I looked at this, I was like, oh, that seems quite good, because the first thing you turn to is, right, well, what does Anarch struggle with? Well, usually the likes of Turing, and then you think about Toll Booth when you think about code gates, and for that, it's only three to break. But then you sit and think about it for a while, and I guess like you've got on your screen there, it does break Lotus Field, again for 3 credits. But when you sit there and go, do I want this as my primary code gate breaker? Probably, in fact, definitely not, because it's 3 to break Quandary, like 3 credits to break a Quandary. That's just insane.
No way.
And 3 to break that. I mean, I've spoken to some people about this, and they're like, oh, but it's got that kind of bounce back effect. I was like, yeah, but that literally kind of redeems it in no way whatsoever for me. This is at best a backup breaker. The only thing that it gives you is an influence-free way to break Turing, and an influence-free way to break Lotus Field.
That is not
because
force of nature.
yeah, that is not force of nature. Which I think the only redeeming feature that Black Orchestra has, apart from its kind of bounce back ability, is the fact that it is better than force of nature, which I'd probably put down as one of the worst breakers in the game. But it's a really, really bad breaker. This as good as Paperclip is, this is as bad as Black Orchestra is.
Yeah, and I feel kind of bad because this had the potential to explore some really good design space. With Paperclip, it's actually most effective against higher strength, multi-sub barriers. You think of Eli and Hive, it breaks it much more efficiently than Kuroda.
Yeah,
Black
I think the
Orchid-
most thing that I'm disappointed about in this is that it's a really cool name, and the theme from it being the kind of the plot against Hitler from within inside the Nazis, which is quite a cool theme to have and bring into it in terms of the conspiracy theories that Omar brings. But yeah, to give such nice, cool theme and actually quite interesting art, and then just make such a bad card is baffling to me. I think the other thing that is like there's no real redeeming feature in a way. Like we're going to talk about Paragreen shortly, and it has a couple of problem ice where you could probably say, well, okay, a data sucker might help here or whatever. Like there's nothing you can do to help this card whatsoever. Like it's going to cost you 3 credits if you're going to use it as a minimum, and that's a really high entry point.
Multi-threader? No, don't bother. But yeah, as you said, it's a pity that all the good flavor, and as you said, with Paragreen and with Khan, that's some pretty good Mongolian flavor right there. It's a bit sad that they are just underpowered. Yeah, and this could have been a very good solution against the big multi-sub code gates that are coming out like Fairchild and DNA Tracker, but no, the numbers are just not there.
Yeah, it's 6 to break DNA Tracker, and it's 6 to break
Correction,
Fairchild.
it's 9 to break DNA Tracker.
What?
It only breaks 2 code gate subroutines.
But you boost it again, right? Because you need to, because that makes it strength 5.
The first
so
boost does not break subroutines. The second boost breaks 2 subroutines. So you need to boost it a third time in order to break the last subroutine.
Oh my god, that's terrible. That's even worse than I thought it was.
You heard it here first, folks. Don't play Black Orchestra.
Yeah.
Alright, let's see what else we've got. How about this one, Omar? Alright, it's our new ID. This one is the 4512 ANR ID. We had null in the same cycle earlier, but this one's the 4512. Click to make a run on archives, and it works. Okay, it's basically a once a turn sneak door that works on HQ or R&D, which actually seems like a really strong ability, having a built-in sneak door on HQ and R&D. But you feel that it is not going to see play in top 16 at Worlds.
I kind of think not. So, like you said, it's basically a slightly better sneak door, but the best thing in my opinion about sneak door is that people seem to forget about it, and it's got that really kind of powerful early game effect. But there's 2 things that you mainly need to consider with Omar, I guess. It's one, that if you're going to play him from the start, they're going to know you're playing and that archives is an issue, so they ice it up. And yes, that does spread their ice a little bit thinner, but you kind of lose the surprise factor about it. And that kind of makes it not quite as good. The second thing to consider, again, kind of being an anarch, is his effect for me, Omar, is only early game, because you get that kind of impetus where you can still attack HQ and R&D before they ice up archives. Like, it's very rare that you're going to play against a corp that's going to ice all 3 centrals, and they can't afford to res them anyway. But if you're comparing it to the likes of Valencia, who has the bad publicity for all game, and that's a really powerful effect all the way through the game, you've got Wizard, who's got 3 credits and is probably the best runner in the game at the moment. Yeah, they're just really strong, and you've got Max as well, who draws well throughout the entirety of the game. Like, Omar, for me, is a really interesting rebirth target and gives you a bit of impetus mid to late game if you kind of need to get your successful Temujin runs, even though there's loads of ice on HQ and R&D, or you need to kind of get that last final bit of access. But as an actual Anarch that you're starting with, 12 influence as well, it's just not for me. Like, Null is certainly the Anarch runner for this cycle for me.
Yes, pushing Null ahead, huh? Given that you finished top 4 with it at local UK regionals. First person to do so in the entire world. That's an achievement. Alright, yes. The biggest reason not to play Omar is that it's not Wizard. And I have to agree with you, I wouldn't start out of Omar. There's too many reasons to start with Wizard right now or Valencia. And Omar just doesn't cut it at the top tier of play. That being said, my prediction is for Omar to make an appearance via Rebirth. I think that really increases the value of Anarch Rebirth, giving you an extra out, and yeah, just landing a very surprise medium run at any time once you Rebirth, landing a surprise Data Sucker counter collection because there might be CVS and archives. So Omar allows you to bypass that and get suckers off other centrals, and activating cards like Temujin or even Apocalypse to rebuild around it. I think it's really strong and definitely a viable rebirth target to consider. So it is definitely a card to watch out for, especially when you're up against a Valencia as the core.
I think it makes a lot of games more interesting, especially when you're playing against Valencia. If I'm kind of sat there, I think the existence of Omar is almost as powerful as the ability itself. So the game that you and I played at Aldershot BABW, the fact that Rumour Mill existed was meaning that you were kind of popping Jacksons.
Yes.
And the fact that Omar exists would be meaning that if you're playing against Valencia and it gets to mid-late game, you're probably going to be considering icing archives. And I think that that is a really kind of powerful effect of it as well, which gives you a lot more ability to attack elsewhere, especially if you're playing something that's really ice-heavy like HB. The fact that they're probably going to have to spend some decent ice on archives is something that they may not normally have done, which in itself is a really good effect.
Definitely. So in short, Omar is a very good option to have as the runner and an option to look out for as the core. So another question that a lot of viewers will probably be asking is, do you think a Valencia rebirth into Omar Apocalypse deck is viable? A deck that goes full on attempting to land the Apocalypse between Blackmails and Omar's ability.
I hadn't actually thought about that, but I suppose it does actually allow that to be a lot cheaper and a lot easier. Yeah, kind of caught me by some of that. I hadn't really thought about it. I would definitely do it out of Valencia or Max or Wizard in doing this. But again, like, the issue I would say for that of going in all in is that, especially in Valencia, you've got 50 cards, one of which is Rebirth. I mean, the chances, like, I wouldn't go all in on the kind of Omar strategy in that respect, because you've got to find the Rebirth, and quite a lot of the time with the Apocalypse, you have to Apocalypse within the first 5 or 6 turns. Otherwise, that strategy is not really going to work.
Yep, that's a very good point. Right. Sorry for surprising you there.
No, it's okay.
That seemed like a very obvious synergy to me with Apocalypse.
I mean, could you build it out of Omar itself? I mean, how much influence is Apocalypse? Is it 3?
Influence. Yeah, so you're basically spending at least half your influence.
So yeah, 9, so you get 3 influence in that. It's probably enough for like 3 fast, right? Or
that's the problem.
A wild side.
Spend influence on your breakers, and that's it. That's all.
Yeah, it's Anarch though, right? Most of the influence you spend is on Anarch cards themselves anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see if the conspiracy theories come on the table. But for now, we'll move on to the criminal faction with Paragreen, which we kind of touched on a bit earlier. This is the bird decoder, second in the suite after Golden, and it has the same D-res effect as Golden, which I assume you would agree with me is quite trash.
I don't know. Like, I was talking to Dave about this, who is probably one of the foremost authorities on all things criminal. I think if you're gonna look at it as an effect, like one of the things we do in Netrunner, I kind of find is that you look at that and go, well, I'm not going to do that on a regular basis, but that doesn't mean it's not as powerful. Like, I think this is probably a once or two turns ability that you're going to use. I mean, if I've just siphoned you, or I'm about to siphon you, are you going to res a toll booth in front of me, taking you down to 1 or 2 credits on the knowledge that I can de-res that toll booth and you've no longer got that to protect you? Like, that in itself is quite an interesting dilemma, and it's something that got raised with Golden, I think. And Golden for me is actually quite an interesting breaker. I mean, if you can kind of get them to res and then de-res like a Vikram or an Archer or something that's quite expensive. And I think that with the inclusion of these new expensive code gates, so things like DNA Tracker and Fairchild 3, which we'll talk about shortly, but also kind of the more expensive ones that you see on a regular basis, so the likes of Tollbooth especially, it presents quite an interesting dilemma if you're playing it in an econ denial deck. And you are going to, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, well, you're paying 2 credits in addition to breaking everything on there, and it's 5 to install again. Yeah, it is, but Criminal has so much money now, like so much money. I think that this card for me is one of the more interesting in this pack, because having played Criminal quite a lot earlier this year, the one thing it really cries out for is a high strength code gate breaker.
Yep.
And this is kind of a use in faction, and some people will be looking at it and going, well, you've got a +3 strength there, which means that if you're going to break something that's a strength 6 code gate, so the likes of Archangel and DNA Tracker, then you're spending an extra 3 credits to boost it to strength 8. And I would say yes, but additionally you've got to look at this as well, is that you're not spending influence on code gate breakers anymore. And if anyone's ever kind of built a code gate, a criminal deck with a code gate breaker in, a criminal deck with a code gate breaker in, you're usually looking at spending 3 or 4 influence on that, whereas putting this in and kind of putting it in with maybe like a passport or something gives you influence for things like data suckers and other stuff like that. And I think that's, considering you're going to be running a lot of the time as well, it's a really good card to have. And I'm not going to be using the secondary effect more than once or twice a game, but if I'm siphoning someone and trying to alter the board state, I think that it does potentially have a very powerful effect, and does raise a question that the corp has to think, do I want to res this? And the fact that he might de-res it, it's sort of emergency shutdown is a good card, right?
Yep.
So why would this not be?
Yeah. I think you offer a very, very interesting perspective on how to use the de-res ability. A lot of people, myself included, view it as something that you build towards, but clearly, unless you're running some sort of London Library jank, you are not going to be actively using this ability. It's something that you judiciously use in situations where perhaps, as you said, where the siphon on HQ turns into vamp because you de-res their ice along with it. So that is actually very interesting. It's an option. It's not something you always use, but it's an option.
Mm-hmm.
As to the strength of it, as to its merit as a decoder, it is basically in all ways worse than a Gordian Blade. Just slightly worse. It costs just 1 more to install. It has the +3 to bump, which is really, really annoying if you're dealing with strength 3 or strength 6 code gates. But on the same token, as you said, you actually save on the 3 influence, which could be spent on something important. So really, if you're looking to play this in a standard criminal deck, you are asking yourself, is that 3 inf worth it for paying that few extra credits for the Paragreen? And that's a good question. I don't have the answer to it. We might just find out at Worlds. You think it'll make a showing at Worlds? I don't think it will. Personally, I think that even Gordian Blade just doesn't cut it. No pun intended. Just
So
doesn't cut it. Yeah.
So the reason I think it's making an appearance is because Andy is going to be played quite predominantly, I think, and Temujin has that effect. And quite a lot of people are going to be considering this in their builds. And I do think that one or two people will probably play it to free up influence for other things like Data Sucker or something else that runs alongside it. I mean, the other thing that you could do as well as Data Sucker, which I've mentioned a couple of times, is you could potentially play Net Ready Eyes with it, which has a lot more adjustability for that. I think that you kind of mentioned Strength 3 code gates and Strength 6 code gates. I've mentioned the Strength 6 ones, but in terms of Strength 3, the only thing that kind of comes to mind for a Strength 3 code gate to me is Magnet.
And Threshold 2.0.
This is true.
And
I hadn't
Crick on
considered that one.
Centrals, yeah. Although I don't think we'll see much Jinteki, but Crick on Central is a thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, if you look at the majority of the ice that gets played, and this is very kind of meta dependent, but I mean, your Strength 5 ice and the code gate, and the Strength of 1, 2, and 0 is kind of where most of the game is at the moment. And if you look at that and consider that it is in faction, for me, it's pretty strong. I mean, there are downsides to it because it's criminal, but I think that it will see some play in some top player decks.
It's cool. Personally, I don't think it will. I think with so many hefty code gates out there, even Gordian Blade is a bit too inefficient for top tier play. But we'll see. I don't think if you're playing a breaker that is as inefficient as Gordian Blade, let alone Paragreen, I think you're going to struggle a lot with money. Okay, but just a quick plug. Vinegary Ming just posted an article a StimHack article on decoders in Criminal Faction. Go check it out. Go to stimhack.com and check it out because it does talk a bit about Paragreen and he offers some interesting insight to that as well.
It's also got some Netrunner fan fiction at the beginning as well.
Oh man, that was A++ material, no doubt. Now we move on to the Shaper faction, which contains another decoder. This one's Houdini, and it basically says, I'm Refractor. Well, almost. So the main difference is that it costs 1 more, it pumps by 4 strength instead of 3, and it has the Gordian Blade effect. That is, it keeps its strength for the rest of the run. It has the same base strength, it breaks code gates for the same ratio, 1 credit to 1 subroutine. So unfortunately, you're not going to get a more efficient solution to breaking those chunky, large code gates. It's still at least 3 credits to break 3 subroutines. But the good news is, with Houdini, it's much harder for corps to play around your Stealth Breaker suite, because one of the best things you can do against Stealth Breakers is to stack the same type of ice on top of each other and drain out the stealth credits, the recurring credits. With Houdini, it says, nope, I'm just going to pump it once and I'm good for the rest of the run. So that is really powerful. But it's so similar to Refractor that in my opinion, it just doesn't, it's not going, whether you play Refractor over Houdini or vice versa, it's not going to make too much of a difference. I think Houdini is the safer pick if you are building a stealth deck, but otherwise it really doesn't make much difference. Would you beg to differ?
I would argue that this card makes Refractor irrelevant now. So I would say that for 2 reasons. Firstly, the 6 strength code gates are now going to be a thing, and one of the things, having played stealth in Jasminda earlier this year, the most annoying piece of ice in the game is probably Archangel, and it's really difficult to have an answer to that. And this kind of gives you that ability. And secondly, the ability that is the same as a Gordian Blade, and this is a consistent problem with stealth rigs, is that you very rarely have enough stealth credits to run more than once a turn, whereas you can just put this down and go, right, well, you've got 3 or 4 code gates stacked there, and you can just go through them all and just pay 1 for each subroutine, and you're through. And that for me is a very, very powerful effect, especially when you're combining it with some of the other stealth regeneration credits that we're going to be seeing either later in this cycle or in this pack even. If you compare it directly to Refractor, so it's 1 extra to install, negligible in this where the runners are incredibly rich, and then the numbers are pretty much the same. I mean, you could say, well, it's 2 to bump for strength, but it's only 1 stealth credit. And I think that the ability of remainder of the run is just so far and away so much better than Refractor, that it's a really, really powerful effect, so much so that I think, like I said, it makes Refractor irrelevant now. I can't see any reason why you would play Refractor over this.
Yeah, with Houdini, you're basically telling the corp, forget it, don't stack those DNA trackers together. Just leave your DNA tracker there and tax out pegs me out for that one ice because stacking ice is not going to help you. What else was I going to say about this? Yes, the both of us predicted that we won't see this at Worlds despite it being a kind of a power creep up from Refractor. I think that's mostly because smoke won't be legal. Would you agree?
Yeah, that is exactly my reasoning for doing it. So I think that this will come into play, and it's certainly as soon as Worlds is over, I'm going to be looking at playing Smoke. I'm a massive Shaper fan, but I haven't played Shaper since the middle of regional season because for me, Anarch and Criminal are probably a little bit stronger now. And the only way for me that Shaper is viable is playing Magnum Opus and kind of Silver Bullet cards, and that's not really something that I want to play personally. But also, if you are going to build that, this card for me doesn't have a place. This breaker doesn't have a place in that kind of setup because it's too reliant on additional stealth credits, and you're going to need to be running Ghost Runners without smoke and things like that. So I would say it's not going to appear in the top 16 because smoke isn't out.
Yep, fully agreed. Let's see, another Shaper card. This one's for smoke as well. It's Net Mercur. Woo! Shaper Desperado! Look at that! Well, that is a card. Once again, I think we both do not think it will appear at World's top 16 simply because smoke won't be out, but boy is it good with smoke. You can just get up and running so quickly.
Yeah, I mean the amazing thing that you can use is if you pair this with smoke. So on smoke, it says that you can use that credit for anything on icebreakers. So as soon as you kind of spend that, like even if you're just paying to not even for a stealth card, like a stealth breaker, you can just spend that and you get that free credit back and on net Mercur, one of those two.
Yep.
And that's just incredible, right? It is literally a Shaper Desperado. The only downside to it, of course, is the fact that it's a resource, but I mean that's really limiting in terms of that. But the last line as well, when you just consider it, it's just insane, right? Like you're getting free money and you can use it on anything, including stealth breakers, because it's a stealth resource. Yes. But you can use it to trash assets and anything.
Exactly. Some people might not actually see this, but use credits for anything actually gives you a lot of liberty. You can run a Sensi Actors Union, use a credit from Net Mercur to trash it, and regain that credit because you are spending a stealth credit of Net Mercur. So it is literally a bad publicity, shall we say, for Shaper, and that's insane. And it's a stealth bad publicity at that. So it helps your Houdini, it helps your dagger or what have you. And most importantly, speaking of dagger, the fact that you can actually accumulate stealth credits, and you can actually use them on killers means that now you can actually viably run Switchblade in Shaper because previously you were forced to import silencers if you want to break multiple sentries with Switchblade instead of just using Ghost Runners. With that option, Switchblade is a really efficient sentry breaker, and oh boy, can't wait to see how that will shape out the game.
I mean, I'd like to see, and I may wrongly assume, but I would assume that there will be some form of stealth Shaper killer in this cycle, because we've already had a barrier breaker, and we've obviously had Houdini in this pack. So I would assume that we would see it at some point. But yeah, the fact that you can run Switchblade and you can get these credits back as well, which is even better. Like if you're comboing this with Mirror, so you can get credits back from running on there. And the main issue with stealth for some time now has been the fact that you can't really make more than 1 or 2 runs a turn, and you struggle to get money for other things because you've got so much money and so many cards invested in the stealth suite that you struggle to be able to play trashing stuff against asset spam or getting rid of the upgrades that are going to be annoying to this type of deck. But it seems that it's got some key economy cards now that certainly make it a lot easier. And also, Smoke's ability is insane. For anyone that's played stealth, usually before you can run in stealth, you need at least an SMC and a clone chip down, because you need to go and get the right stealth breaker and you need to go and get a cloak, or you need a ghost runner down to be able to run. Whereas with smoke now, you literally need some credits. You need some credits and an SMC, and you're good to go.
Yeah.
At least on one piece of ice, and that is a really, really powerful ability.
Yes. So the big question here is, with so much stealth support, you have to ask yourself, is this really what smoke needs? Because okay, now she's gonna slice through all your ice like Swiss cheese. But what about asset spam? What about hard-hitting news? What about flatline? I wonder if she has anything, if Shapers rather have anything up their sleeves to deal with all these alternate strategies.
So I think that Mercur helps in the asset spam for the reasons we've just said, in terms of you sort of get some money back and you can pay to trash stuff. In terms of hard-hitting news, there's the new program Misdirection, I think it is, which allows you to clear tags for 2 clicks, and you pay X for X number of tags, which for me is a massive power creep, because Shaper has always been really vulnerable to tags, and it's something that's been massively concerning. For me, that should have been a criminal program, but I'm not going to debate that now. But I think that I don't know whether it's because Damon loves smoke, and I'm really pleased that Shaper's getting a lot of love in this pack. But for me, there seems to be a small power creep on this, and especially on the stealth side of things, to the degree that I kind of feel like the way that it's gone at the moment, that ice, if you play stealth, is going to become a little bit invulnerable. Like it's going to become less important because of just how good and efficient this is going to be. Again, we haven't seen the rest of the pack, so it may be that the strategy is going in a different direction. I mean, if you're going to compare this to something that's playing asset spam, then obviously I would say that Wizard's going to be better, but Wizard's going soon. But then you've got Valencia with Scrubbers and things. But is it winnable against those types of matchups? I would say yes. If you kind of, does it really matter how much money they accrue if you can just get through the ice and the assets really early? Does it matter how many tags they give you if you can just get rid of those tags really quickly once you've got your rig set up? I mean, with all that and smoke and the way that it could look in terms of having a full rig set up and the speed you can do to stop them from getting up agendas, like, I would say that you're looking to be in a pretty invulnerable position if you've kind of got something like that. I mean, the only way you could get rid of stuff like this is, I guess, scoring a breaking news and then playing something like All Seeing Eye, or something like that. But that's how I would look at it, that you ignore the asset spam and you literally go, well, you can do that, but I've got my multi-access and I can go and get any agenda that you try and score behind any piece of ice.
Yes, I have to agree with you in the regard that once smoke is set up, you can't keep her out. And the really scary thing for me is that she has all the influence in the world to show up all those sideways matchups. 15 whole influence. You don't have to spend influence for breakers or your stealth credits, so yeah, splash all the scrubbers, splash all the damage protection you want. She's not going anywhere. Seems like a very strong archetype. If
you kind of look at what's she going to spend her influence on, so she doesn't need draw for influence because you've got diesel and quality time, so that's fine. You've got Houdini as your breaker. You've got SMC, which is in faction. You're probably going to spend one or two pieces of influence on clone chip. You've got programs that you need. Mirror is going to be her obvious console. So what exactly are you spending?
You need clone chip, do you? Because your breakers, once they're installed, they're done. Unless you want to run clot, which is fair game. But otherwise, you don't actually need clone chip.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you could run clot, but the other thing, I always try and keep one there because I'm always forever frightened of someone playing trash programs with Marcus Batty. But
definitely, sure, that's a good reason to keep a clone chip. But yeah, you are very much free.
You could run scavenge as well, just for posterity's sake, if you were going to do that. So you could even get around it. So yeah, what does Smoke spend her influence on is a good question. And I'm going to be really excited to mess around with her and see what I can build when Worlds is out of the way.
Account Siphon.
Oh dear God.
I mean, you are Mark, and he is Dave, and you two are very famous for Siphon spam strategies. I'm with you on that, true. If you want to build a Siphon smoke deck. But for now, we have to move on to the thing that will save you if you are siphoning too much. Or will it actually save you? This is First Responders. This is trying to be a plus creep replacement, but I'm sorry. Unfortunately, this doesn't cut it. So, this provides you some sort of utility in that once you take damage, you can start drawing up. So for that reason, it protects you against a standard damage combo like Sea Scorched Earth, perhaps a Ronin plus Neuro EMP kill, protects you against that as well, but that's about it. It doesn't protect you against single shot combos. Most importantly, the Accelerated Diagnostics combo into kill doesn't protect you against Boom, which deals you lethal damage before you can draw up. So because of that and the fact that it's a resource, I don't think it's going to replace Sports Hopper or Plascrete in the damage protection slots.
I would wholeheartedly and add more disdain on the pile for this card. So one of the things that I've been waiting for before I kind of finalized on my deck building for Worlds was what the neutral runner card was going to be, in the hope that it was something that provided a lot of meat damage protection or some way of kind of combating in Boom. And this really isn't it. I mean, for me, you look at something like Guru Devinder, which was earlier this cycle or last cycle, and that card, although it's 4 credits, is a lot more powerful in its effect. And my question is for this is it for me, the way that it looks, it's basically Jinteki hate. It is in no way, I want to say Wayland hate. It's not Wayland hate. It's yellow hate, because it's meat damage and tags. And if you've got meat damage and tags, why is it a resource? I get in terms of theme that it's a connection and stuff, but why is it a resource? Like, if this was a hardware, then that might be interesting, because you can pay 2 credits and that saves you essentially from a traffic accident and a Scorch Earth combo, because you go up to 6 cards. But if you are playing against Boom, it kills you. Unless you're going to combo this with Obolus, but why would you do that? And yeah, I don't. This is not the card I was looking for. Is in short what I have to say about this. It's a resource, so in all the tag hate, it's not going to do anything. And the only viability I see against it is net damage protection. And what does this give me over Sports Hopper? Or what does this give me over Guru Devinder other than a couple of credits? Not very much at all.
Now, if you notice, you can use it as many times as you want, almost like a panic button. You have to activate it with net damage or any form of damage, but once you do, you can actually draw as many cards as you want, help you find the pieces you need, help you find the indexing to close out the game. So in that regard, it might be better than some other net damage protection cards against Jinteki, but again, as you said, because of all the reasons, because it's dead against most tag and back strategies, I don't think you'll see a lot of play, if any at all.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the only other thing I could do, or kind of assume from this, is if you if you faceplant something like a DNA tracker, and you're just like, oh, I'll just spend now that I've lost 2 credits, I'm going to spend 2 more credits to draw a card so I don't die in the next subroutine, and then I'm going to lose 2 minutes in that. What kind of infinite money do you have to do in that?
Sorry, I don't think you can do that, because there's no payability window between subs. So nice try.
Yeah, I was just thinking you kind of face planting into ones that gives you some form of damage to be able to allow you to draw cards to something that you want. But why would you? I don't get that you would need to spend so much money to try and find the card that you want. I mean, rather than doing that, just stack your deck with draw cards. It's just a lot easier, rather than relying on the maxi doing some damage to you. I mean, if you're going to look at that ability, then you're just going to say, well, what do I do against a deck that isn't doing me any damage? I'm basically just not going to be able to use this ability.
Nope.
And I'm going to keep coming back to the fact that it's a resource, because quite a lot of the damage you're going to get nowadays in the current meta is the fact that it's a tagged meat damage.
Yep. So
Not
sadly,
good.
Yep, this is just not going to cut it, which is quite sad. I think we both were looking for a solution to Boom. This wasn't it. Well, that does it for the runner side. Join us next time where we review the top half of Escalation. For now, thanks for watching and happy net running. See you around.
Thanks.
Oops. Give me a sec. Trying to.
That's all right.
The video. Alright, that went on for quite a bit. I really like your contribution. That's a lot of good stuff. So
Thanks.
Come on. It's lagging
I
so
love
much.
this card.
Haha, fair shot 3.